as someone who turned 33 a few years ago, great. Good news for me.
Just, if you want to put a number to it, I was like, great, as we're researching this.
All right, welcome back to the Chemist Confessions podcast. I'm Gloria.
I'm Victoria.
This is a human conversation on all the skincare science we talk about on the daily. And before we get started, I just want to apologize ahead of time for any of y'all who have sent their kids to daycare before. I am in the midst of being sick for going on a whole month now because of all the daycare germs. So my voice sound a little funny, but let me just get that out of the way.
They be potent.
Yes, but today's episode is, one that I think is, as we put it together, turned out a lot more interesting than I thought. It's going to be all about skincare by different ages.
Yeah, I think it's been a question that we get. Obviously not of the full age range, but I think the general question that people always start with is, I am blank years old, and this is my skincare. What should I be doing?
Yeah.
So we're going to try to see, or at least share, some of the science behind studying skin as it ages over time. I don't actually think it's going to be that dreary, which is sometimes how the science can be with age. I don't know, Gloria, what do you think?
Before we jump right into it, we should mention that the way we're breaking down this episode is we're going to start with the biology of how skin ages. And if we can put any logic around the product we use versus, the age range that we're in. And some of that, like Victoria mentioned, is it can sound a little depressing. But at the end of it, we're going to talk about some of our thoughts, our experience, and also some of the clinical testing around products at different decades of your age. And I think as the episode go on, or like by the end of us putting together this episode, I'm like, you know what? Honestly, the point isn't to feel like so doom and gloom about the aging process. It's more about, hey, this is what's happening. These changes are normal, but here is how we can maybe delay or maybe help skin respond to these changes better. And it's not all bad news from there.
Yeah. We're going to get right into the biology, and let's just start with an overarching summary of where skin is at. Ultimately, and this is something we wrote about extensively in Skincare Decoded, is that aging has two factors. There's the photoaging aspect. It's the external aging culprits, and the main factor being UV. And then we have our chronoaging. This is just aging over time. And in terms of UV, typically what they've seen is through photo damage accumulation, it essentially just aggravates and accelerates the aging process. Although there are a couple papers that did actually try to break down like what factors really come from photoaging and UV damage versus the chronoaging aspect, which I thought was interesting. A lot of it is actually the kind of the pigmentation and topography. So they have said that spider veins really stem from the photoaging aspect. From one of the papers, I'll share one of the tables here where they kind of break down some of the skin changes due to photoaging versus chronoaging. You can see from photoaging, you get wrinkles and furrows, some of the sunspots. I can't say that. I never say this word correctly. I think it's telangiectasis or something, but basically that is spider veins, model pigmentation. You also can get kind of this rough surface area on skin as you age over time. And then you also can get sort of this like bruising purple pigmentation. So a lot of it has to do with the pigmentation aspect and rough surface. Meanwhile, for chronoaging, you'll see things like dry skin thinning, sagging, and a decrease in sebum production. And these are just general umbrellas. This is very overarching, but I do like to think of it as, what components are really from sun versus, time itself.
These are more the visible changes that you notice in your skin. And what's going on under the surface, very generally speaking, is that as we age, a lot of the structural components are degrading, most notably collagen. And we also have a decrease in your skin, your skin's lipid matrix. Everyone knows that ceramide content also decreases. Like Victoria mentioned, sebum production levels also down, which leads to a lot of dryness. There are some general trends in terms of your skin pH slowly creeping up away from that healthy acid mental low pH kind of range. All of these are just factors that results in these changes in your physical appearance.
I did have one comment about this table. If you look at chronoaging, you kind of look at what's asterisked, you will notice that, and you're probably wondering why this happens with skin. You'll notice that a lot of this is actually tied to hormone levels. And that's really one of the major triggers for a lot of these processes and why they start to become a lot more inefficient. So for things like, especially things like collagen, and you keep hearing the number, it's like late 20s, that's when it happens. If you're wondering why it's late 20s, kind of what they see is that our estrogen levels are peak at that time point. It's when it all comes to light. That's when our decrease of estrogen starts. And that's why collagen you're seeing at that same time point. So that's what they're able to correlate to. Obviously, there's a lot of other factors, but that's kind of that major one right there, which I thought was interesting because we always hear the number, but we never know why. We just think it's time, but that's not really it.
Yeah, and actually, I was going to say that when we're putting together these episodes, a lot of these things are trends that we are already aware of. But when we wanted to find some paper backing these trends up, it's actually kind of interesting to place an actual age range to these changes. One of the first papers I found is a super old study done in 1984. And what they do is a technique that we don't see a lot of anymore in academia or in research, which is measuring skin hydration through a special like frequency propagation through the layers of skin. And the way they broke it down is 20-year-olds, 20 to late 30s as an age bracket, and 40s to 60s as a separate age bracket. And you'll see in the chart that in the late 40s to 60s, skin has measurably less water content based on this very old method of measuring skin hydration. So I thought that was very neat. And I will say a lot of times that as a dry skin person looking at this chart, I was like, oh, I can already feel what I think is hydration level changes in my 20s and my 30s. But in these studies, you see that gap widening in your late 40s and 50s. So it's probably not as, these changes in skin doesn't really come as early as I think nowadays social media and companies want to believe. Another big thing that we actually talk about a lot on this podcast is that skin turnover is a big indication of how healthy your skin is. You want that rate to be, skin turnover rate as it slows down can exacerbate dry skin, can also compromise your skin barrier function, letting in all the baddies and further compromising skin turnover rate. That's why we put chemical exfoliants like glycolic acid at such a high level. But naturally, as we age, we're not talking about environmental factors and anything else. As we age, this turnover rate does slow down. And this is something I just accepted as fact in the back of my head through all of our years working in the industry. But someone actually did a study that that measures skin turnover rate across different age ranges. And they broke people down into 18 to 29-year-old, 30 to 39, 40 to 49, 50 to 59, 60 to 69, and there's even a group for 70 to 80. I should mention that these groups are all very small. So these numbers, take it with a grain of salt. There's essentially 10 people in each decade of age. And you'll see they measure transit time and replacement rate. Replacement rate is given in number of cell layers that goes in a day, which I thought is a pretty interesting type of measurement that we don't talk a lot about.
Yeah.
What they found in this paper is that there's a big cliff that starts happening actually in your 50s. So the slowdown in cell turnover rate isn't super apparent until your 50s. Between 18 to 49, the average transit time of your cell is 20 days. Whereas in your 50s, 59, that average goes all the way up to 25 days. And your replacement rate of cells goes from 0.8 layers per day all the way down to 0.7 layers per day. And even with such a small sample size, they were able to get significant differences between these groups. So a couple of things that's interesting to me is that I don't know why I always have correlated a decrease in cell turnover rate in the same way as collagen level decrease. So it's like, by the time you're 30s, your skin turnover rate is ass and you should be exfoliating. And looking at this, I was like, okay, relax. Chemical exfoliant still has a place in your routine, but it's not as dire or as early as the perception.
I really love this test because it's so very clear like what's going on. And If you guys are wondering what transit time means, that's just typically a cell going from the bottom of your epidermis all the way to the top. How long that takes typically. So I really like that. And, the other thing that I think is really cool, it's like even up to until you're almost 50, that your general replacement rate looks pretty good. So I found that to be a good piece of news, honestly.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, so I really like this study overall. If you're ever wondering, you want to put some numbers to this ultimately, which is often hard to do.
And the last piece of study that we wanted to share is this gigantic study that also looked at people from 0 to 12 all the way up to over 70. And there's a whopping 700 subjects total in the study. You should mention that this study is done in China, so specifically on ethnically Chinese subjects. So not all of these numbers are going to translate over to every ethnicity, but we still think that some of the insights are kind of interesting. And the first chart I'm going to put up from the study is the sebum level. I find that they did a bunch of different measurements like skin pH and skin hydration and sebum level. But I do find like the big data view on the sebum level to be really interesting. First of all, it's not surprising that it goes way up in your teenage years. Also not surprising that it is higher in males than females. The females are the red bars and the males are the black bars. What I find to be really shocking is in the over 70 group, the female sebum level is at whoosh. It's like gone. And the males are like, oh yeah, we still have some sebum. It's totally cool. I'm like, that is not fair.
Yeah, and for our audio listeners, I'll try to kind of describe what's going on. But ultimately, when they look at the male, I believe male forehead actually, which I find to be in some ways more important here because people concentrate so much on the face. There is not a single bar that is lower at any point than the female forehead at any time point. So what that means is males consistently will have way more sebum than a female in her prime, except for the ages of 0 to 12, which children's skin, striking, and agree, could not be more unfair about all of this.
I think people in their teenage years and 20s, and Victoria can attest to this, like if you are more prone to breakouts, sebum almost sounds like a dirty word, like, oh, your skin's shiny, it's oily. But remember, sebum does have it's there to protect your skin. It's skin's natural hydration function. There's components to your sebum that not only keep your skin hydrated, but also helps fend off pathogens and outside aggressors. It's very important to skin. So saying that like, oh, I have no sebum to speak of, it's not a good thing. It's not a good thing at all. So from the study, they also did skin pH and hydration level. Skin pH is kind of whatever, so I'm not going to go through that data. I find skin hydration to be kind of interesting. It's not the trend isn't as clear across different genders here, but there is a huge drop-off in hydration level in the over 70 group.
Even for men,
yeah.
Which, the thing I have been talking about all the time is just because you're oily doesn't mean you're hydrated. There you go.
Yeah. And lastly, I'm going to put up a quick chart to explain why I didn't go over the skin pH trends. Is because they kind of made a conclusion. If you're just reading the abstract, they'll say skin pH trends up as you age. But if you look at it, which they were very nice to put the raw data into table form and then show the linear regression model on it, you're like, wow, that is all over the place. I am surprised the computer was able to spit out a linear regression from the sea of dots on there.
It's very wide. It really, Jackson Pollock vibes.
Yeah, but that's basically it for our general biology changes as we age. To kind of reiterate everything, as we age, the big things are your collagen decreases as early as 30, and ceramide level decrease, sebum level decrease, which all contributes to drying skin. In females, that kind of drop. And also cell turnover rate decrease. In females, the notable drop-off range is 50s up, where a lot of things are also impacted by menopause. Measurably speaking, that's when your skin hydration takes a huge hit. So that's the general changes that skin deal with as we age. We're going to take a really quick break, and then we're going to get right into some of our recommendations at every decade of your life.
Let's do it. If you've been lurking on our website recently, you might have noticed that Balm Voyage looks pretty different because Balm Voyage 2.0 is here. Well, sort of. We launched our pre-sale where you can purchase our new Balm Voyage via one of our holiday bundles, so you can get your hands on our new and improved Balm early.
Balm Voyage 2.0 is an improvement in just about every department. The packaging is now a fully recyclable tube made with PCR, that's post-consumer recyclable plastic. The formula has also been upgraded. The fan favorite
Such
1%,
a pain. Sorry,
it was
such a pain.
The fan
A
favorite
pain.
1% ceramide 3 and the soothing Blaswelder Serrata are all still there, but we've also added a special grade of clinically tested shea to this formula. So say goodbye to dry and chapped lips and skin in just 2 days. Sign up for the waitlist and be the first to know when it's officially in stock.
Hey, you.
All right, let's get into all of our top tips at every decade of your life, starting with teenage years.
All right. This is going to be the simplest group.
It's Victoria's time to shine.
The most simple group here. You're going to see that skin honestly is on its way to peaking. So in that sense, it's good in every way. And because of that, the importance in your teenage years is really just establishing really good habits of products like your moisturizer, your cleanser, and your SPF. That's it. Skin doesn't need anything else, which means I absolutely detest seeing every single TikTok video of teenagers purchasing Drunk Elephant. That is so irresponsible. It makes me so upset. That price point makes no sense. And there's no reason skin in its prime should be having any of those actives added. It's just such a waste. What a waste.
Yeah, I think
Anyways, that's it.
2 Christmases ago, my 15-year-old niece requested the Protini as their Christmas gift.
Oh my God.
And yeah, I was like, why do you need a $60 cream? And her words, not mine. She's like, I heard it has peptides. It's good for my skin, prevents aging. I'm like, why?
What aging is happening? And if you are seeing aging, it sounds like your sunscreen habits aren't very good. It's incredibly upsetting. And I think the main thing, and probably where most teenagers start getting into skincare, if you're not pushing for the Drunk Elephant, is acne.
Yes.
So this is where, again, I want to emphasize good skincare habits. One of my biggest regrets is how terrible my skincare habits were during my teenage years. You know, trying to have, trying to expunge every drop of oil on my face, never putting on moisturizer, dousing all of my acne breakouts in every OTC product available. There's no reason for that. And ultimately, yes, this is where hormone levels start to fluctuate. And when it really becomes just too much, and I totally understand just the general taboo nature of acne, this is where you really want to team up with a derm to kind of start your skincare journey and your acne journey on the right foot. So those are some of the things to keep in mind. But other than that, you shouldn't, if you feel any pressure to start getting into more complex skincare, there's really no need. This skin is its best.
I just want to say, as someone with a lot of nieces and nephews that's, in this phase right now, I just want to reiterate that this is the early years of habit-forming skincare, right? And if you're a parent helping out your teen, outside of acne, which has its own episodes where we talked about actives, like Victoria said, if it's severe, consult a derm. Other than those, cleanse and sun protection is so important to start your kid off on the right foot here. And some level of moisturizer, but then again, you don't really need like heavy creams per se, but just having the habit of having one is very important. And I really want to say that a lot of kids, while TikTok has influenced them to buy the Protinis, they don't wash their face every day. That to me is like, just observationally speaking, kids, listen. If before you use a $60 cream, wash your face every day. That is a good place to start on skincare.
Totally. Such a good point.
So that's it for your teenage years. Let's get into the 20s. 20s is when it's definitely all about prevention. And hopefully you already have some good habits formed from your teenage years. If not, this is really the time to go all in on sunscreen, really finding the one that works for you, that you are willing to use daily. And secondly, I think this is actually a good time to introduce vitamin C.
In your 20s, there's really no formation of wrinkles significantly happening in this stage. At the end of the 20s is where you might see whispers, general pigmentation, and some wrinkle development. So this is where you want to just make sure your prevention part of your routine is set up nicely. If you are using retinoids, sometimes people are already starting. That's totally fine. A lot of them are. It's because acne is sort of the gateway drug to retinoids. There's nothing wrong with continuing that or starting that in your 20s, but really the focus here is prevention. And ultimately, I feel like that's where topical skincare does it best.
Mm-hmm.
So why not have that strategy laid out perfectly in this decade?
I should mention that unless you're transitioning from acne retinoids, let's say you're in your 20s, let's say you're in your late 20s and you want to start on a retinol regimen, this is an age where I think your it's good to build up the collagen reservoir, right? Because it starts going in your 30s. So there's nothing wrong with incorporating a retinol. There is absolutely zero negative need to go for the highest level of retinol at this age, right? No irritation is key. Consistency is key. Even if you're just using a low level retinol consistently in your routine and you experience no irritation, you don't really need to seek out irritation for the sake of thinking that you're getting more collagen because of it. 0.1 to 0.3% is perfectly fine here.
I had two thoughts. One is, you were yelling at teenagers for not washing their face. But if I were to think about a period of my life where I had terrible cleansing habits, it's probably in my 20s because, just gallivanting out in the night, things like that.
You mean
irregular sleep schedules?
You mean after clubbing, double cleansing isn't high on your priority list?
Yeah, that's probably eating all the ramen will come way before that.
Actually,
yeah, go ahead.
I will never forget. I think this was it was not in San Diego, but this was like one of the first time I went to some part of Southern California with Victoria. And then one thing, not even Southern California in general. One thing led to another. We were at a bar and then blah, 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 blah. And then at 1 a.m., I find myself eating loaded nachos, like with taco meat and melted cheese at 1 a.m. I cannot do that anymore in my 30s. My skin will pay for it the next day. But at that time, I was like, that's a great idea. This is great.
Yeah. In some ways, I almost want to tell myself, like, enjoy the resiliency. Because, and especially now, it's not the same. I will be hit internally as well as externally, So that was one thought. And then the other one is, as industry insiders and clinical testers, we will not look for people in their 20s because, testing products on people in this age range is just the difference and the improvements you see sometimes will not show up and it won't be very significant.
If you're starting here, you can only hope to be here versus if you're starting here, there's a range of improvement that you can work for. Yeah,
exactly. So that was one thing I did want to share. If you're looking for extreme changes, this is not the age to really see significant differences when adding a lot of actives to your routine. So that was one thought.
Cool. We're going to take a quick break. And then after the break, we'll go over 30s and up. All right. I am in charge of today's Animal Fun Fact Corner. Yay. And today, the Animal Fun Fact Corner is not an animal. It is a plant.
Oh, snap. Yep. Things I cannot keep alive.
I randomly read about this. It was actually just a comment. It was a completely unrelated thread on Reddit. It was on Redditors, like, what is the scariest thing in your country? And someone from Australia, the country that's known for the Spideys, the ancient dinosaur birds that can slash lines into your car and really
just giant, evil-looking creatures.
Yeah, all around. Someone from Australia mentioned this plant. So I'm like, of all the things you can choose in Australia, what is so special about this plant? So I looked into this and it is fascinating. It is a plant called the Gimpie.
Doesn't sound very menacing.
It's not. And I'll put a picture of it up. It looks very vanilla.
It does.
And I'm just going to read some passages that honestly came straight from Wikipedia. And these are some of the best lines I've read in a long time. So let's go. These plants have very fine brittle hairs called the trichomes, and they're loaded with toxins that cover the entire plant. Even the slightest touch will embed them in skin. Electron micrograph images show that they're similar to a hypodermic needle in being very sharp-pointed and hollow. Additionally, it has been shown that there is a structurally weak point near the tip of the hair, which acts as a preset fracture line. So when it enters the skin, the hair fractures at this point, allowing the contents of this trichome to be injected right into the victim's tissues.
So microneedles in plants out to get you. Scary.
Yes.
Okay.
This is poison ivy on crack. So, and then it gets worse. The trichomes stay in the skin for up to a year. Then release the toxin cocktails into the body during triggering events such as touching the affected area, contact with water, or even temperature changes.
Okay, so just existing.
Yes, by existing, it will constantly release toxins into your skin. Ernie Ryder, a conservation officer with the Queensland Parks and Wildlife Service, was slapped in the face and torso with the foliage in 1963 and said, for 2 or 3 days, yes.
Who slapped him? Why was he slapped?
I have no idea. I'm assuming he just walked into a bush and didn't know what he was getting himself into. And he wrote,
okay.
For 2 or 3 days, the pain was almost unbearable. I couldn't work or sleep. I remember it feeling like there were giant hands trying to squash my chest. Then it was pretty bad pain for another fortnight or so. The stinging persisted for 2 years and recurred every time I had a cold shower. There is nothing to rival it. It's 10 times worse than anything else.
Oh my God.
I'm going to end on the last section, which is what causes this intense pain. Because what's really interesting is people have known about these plants for decades and decades, but it wasn't until 2020 until what causes that pain has actually been identified. So before, they were surmising that it's a blend of toxins, and one of the leading components is formic acid, which is also in ants and ant bites. But they're like, wait, this intensity doesn't even compare. Like formic acid doesn't stack up to that level of pain. And then it wasn't until 2020 that a previously unknown family of disulfide-rich peptides identified by a group
peptides.
Yes. So for all of you who are like, peptides are good for anti-aging, this is how diverse peptides are, okay? They were actually, a group of researchers named this group of peptides Gimpie peptides because researchers are very, very creative.
So
these compounds were shown to be similar to some toxins found in cone snails, which are also very toxic. Snails.
Yeah.
Yep. And they produce significant pain response in laboratory tests. Moreover, their complex structure resembling the inhibitor cysteine knot, which is a very special type of chemical bond, it made them highly stable, and this is why it lasts for years.
Oh my God.
Yeah, this to me was a horrifying and fascinating read, and it's so interesting that they didn't even identify this until recently. Yeah. And there was one more horrifying line I'm going to share with everyone before we walk away from the Gimpie. They say that it is known that the active constituents are very stable since dead leaves found on the forest floor and even decades-old laboratory specimens can still sting.
Wow. See, and also, this is another case where we're like, plants are very complex. Like, they stump researchers out there, like, and people always push plant stuff, and we're like, hey, maybe we don't know enough to be pushing plant stuff. This is a great example of, oh my God, this is super cool. From a science level, super fascinating. From a potential traveler to Australia, way, way, way terrifying.
Yes. And from a formulator perspective, I'm like, something that is an active ingredient so stable that we don't have to worry about, cool, except people shouldn't be using this.
Yeah, probably not. Probably not.
Not this kind of dipeptide.
Yeah, seriously.
Anyway,
okay.
That's the Gimpie.
I feel like the name, they should probably change it up, like poison Gimpie, or like toxic. I don't know. Maybe it needs a little prefix just to, make it not sound so innocent, because it's not.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, and it looks so vanilla. Yes. It's just like a slightly hairy looking leaf on a vine, and you're like, oh, it's just a plant that will screw your life up for at least 2 years.
Yeah, for audio listeners, it kind of looks like one of those broader leaves that you probably have as a house plant. It just has little spikes on the edges, so it looks very innocent. Terrifying. Just another thing we need to fear going to Australia. Just when you didn't have enough. Okay. Yay! Very good, very good.
We're gonna jump right into 30s and 40s. We were going to break them down into 2 different decades, but as we do research, realized that skincare in this across these 2 decades are actually pretty similar.
With different ethnicities comes different characteristics of aging. And this is where certain things start showing up. And I did want to mention funny study. It's very small, but Japan actually wanted to fine tune at what age significant wrinkling started.
Dear Japan, no one cares. No, I don't want to know that.
And also know that Japan's just Asian beauty standards in general, I think, are one of the most toxic, probably, and most critical. So they fine tune it, and it is a small study, I should mention. But I just gonna mention, they said the specific age is 33.
Oh, as someone who turned 33 a few years ago. Great. Good news for me.
Just, if you want to put a number to it, I was like, great, as we're researching this. Okay. But all in all, we want to say, obviously, continue prevention. None of that should stop. And a lot of the, and that's really your sunscreen and your vitamin C. And also remember, vitamin C is not just a great prevention aspect. It's got great pigmentation and wrinkle fighting benefits as well. But we would say this is the realm where, starting to target things that are looking at collagen production can really start coming into play.
This is the age where we would say if you are into skincare, it's definitely time to look into anything that boosts collagen protection for long-term age prevention. So if you haven't yet, definitely a great time to start experimenting with the retinols. And we talked about in the peptides episode, while there is a wide range of peptides, we would say this is also a good age range to kind of experiment with anti-aging peptides, as it can tackle anti-aging and wrinkle prevention from a very different angle than retinol. Anything else like sunscreens and also vitamin C, these like preventative stuff, just carry on. It's just good habit to have these in your routine at this point. And yeah, I do want to mention that I, as a dry skin person who first noticed skin getting a little drier in their 20s, I wouldn't be surprised if this is also the age range where you start, even though from the data we see in part 1 that that statistically speaking, a big drop off in hydration doesn't come till your 50s. I am not surprised if you're already feeling some changes and some pains with your moisturizer from your 20s, not really doing the job anymore. So I actually think barrier care is a huge factor here as well.
Yeah, agreed. And just remember, it's so general because there are certain life changes that will also come into play. One of the bigger ones being pregnancy.
Yes.
So, we're not really accommodating for some of these huge milestones in life, but I think that's a great one to bring up. And then finally, this is where AHAs. We did mention that's really the 50s where this is significant, but adding just a little bit to your routine in this period of time will help with, just remember, keeping this surface of skin smooth. AHAs can also help in tackling some of the initial hyperpigmentation you might start encountering. So there's nothing wrong with adding this into your routine at this time.
Yeah. And lastly, we will say a lot of like newer skincare to hear about, like we did one on exosomes. There's a lot of devices and things like One Skin that tout these new proprietary ingredients. A lot of those type of clinical studies, if they've done one responsibly, are done on people in the high 30s, late 30s, and early 40s kind of age range. So this is also something that if you're interested in, is a good time to kind of experiment a little bit.
So that's generally the 30s and 40s. This is where hopefully you guys feel like you're adding more than just the prevention aspect. You're really starting to look at some of these other actives that are in the realm of correcting. But then the next time point for us is really menopause and postmenopause. This really kicks off a lot of changes in skin with that decrease in hormones. So just want to keep in mind the average postmenopause range is, in the US at least, is 52. The range being pretty wide, anywhere between 45 to 55. And we're not going to actually touch on this realm too much because this is actually a huge, bigger realm of research and something that Gloria and I really want to dedicate to the next episode, where we're actually going to look at hormone skincare that uses things like estradiol and estriol. So stay tuned for that. But we did want to just call out that this is where sebum really takes a drop on top of the topography changes. And for me, Gloria, I don't know if you feel this way, this is where dry skin, this is where you want to tackle that as the first thing that comes to mind. You have to get the dry skin down because that is just, it really is the central pain point that really kicks off a lot of the other unwanted cascades, for me at least, when I was kind of dabbling in all of this research.
100%. I checked in with my mom on this episode. I inherited my dry skin from her, and she was like, oh yeah, I thought I had dry skin, but postmenopause is dry skin with a capital DRY, and it's definitely a lot more difficult to find the right product for you. And I will say, when we start dabbling and researching this episode is when I realized that even though so much of skincare is meant to address aging, helping people age gracefully and tackling the signs of aging, there is a huge lack of clinical testing of women post-menopause. A lot of clinicals we've shared on this podcast before, ones that test for signs of aging, usually is in the range of mid-30s to late 50s maybe, or maybe a lot of studies will concentrate on that mid-30s to mid-40s range. Sometimes it will kind of stretch into that 50s to 60s territory, but there are very few studies that's dedicated to mature skin in this way. So in this sense, I want to take this time to share the SkinCeuticals triple lipid clinical test. This is one of those hallmark products that kicked off the whole debate around the ceramide, cholesterol, and fatty lipid ratios, yada, yada, yada. I'm not going to get into all that drama. We're just going to focus on clinical test results, because they actually tested on 59 people, women ages between 55 and 75. So solely in that mature skin age range. And they had some before-after pictures up to show a decrease in appearance of wrinkles. And they actually probably can't really talk about this in their formal marketing, but they did measure the ceramide content of skin before and after 8 weeks of continual use. And they saw a total increasing ceramide level of 57%, with the most notable coming from ceramide 3, a whopping 500% fold increase from baseline. So these are all super duper interesting data, and this is why triple lipid is a pretty important product in the SkinCeuticals lineup. And also why it's one of the most duped products in the SkinCeuticals lineup. There are a lot of ceramide creams out there. Some position themselves really, really directly against SkinCeuticals. There's a lot of Reddit threads that talk about how triple lipid being $155 is absurd, and there are talks of I would just buy this for $20 or this for however many dollars. But we'll say that if you have mature skin or really dry skin, it's a pretty special formula, because I'm just going to pull the Skin Fix one up on the screen for comparison. They have a product that is also called triple lipid. It's called triple lipid and peptides cream. It's very blatantly positioned as a slightly cheaper alternative to SkinCeuticals. This one's $55 instead of the $155 of SkinCeuticals. And I should hand it to them that of all the dupes out there, they also did a clinical study. But just by comparison, you can see the difference in positioning. One done for 30 minutes on 32 subjects for that instant hydration effect, and one that is done on 16 subjects after 1 month. So first of all, the timeline is dramatically shorter. The clinical done by SkinCeuticals was done for 8 weeks versus this is 1 month. And they didn't share I couldn't find the age range of their study subjects, but just in the before and after picture that SkinFix features, you can already tell that this definitely extends down into that 20s, 30s age group for hydration level. And to me, I'm like, you know what? This kudos to SkinCeuticals, because I had a hard time looking at products that mainly only tested on mature skin.
Claire and I haven't talked about this too much, but I have a very love-hate relationship with dupes. I think that it, for example, CE Referral, watching it follow inflation in terms of price point is I agree, it's very painful. So to have a more affordable vitamin C for all, great. In this scenario, I absolutely hate dupes, because I think for moisturizers especially, and especially with some of the work done, I can tell you doing a clinical that tracks ceramide levels is very, very not cheap, and it just belittles some of the formulation work at hand. So it's, again, I have a lot of feels about dupes, and this is where I'm triple lipid is definitely worth considering. Gloria and I have been lucky to see kind of the inside works of, this product being developed, and just know that, with all the testing behind it, I have to say, I think there's very few products that have actually done the level of research in this scenario, especially for this age range. So Anyways, I have a lot of feels.
I totally agree. And I think this is where I kind of, I think, like Victoria, I think my feelings around this is a little complex. For ferulic, I kind of have a feeling of like, well, you made your money during the patent period and it's expiring soon. So like, huzzah, everyone can kind of ride on the coattails of your research. Whereas triple lipid has only been on the market for so long. And I think the rhetoric around moisturizers is a little bit more difficult to communicate, right?
I guess, and I also want to say, like, the ingredients in triple lipid is not an apples to apples comparison to the Skin Fix moisturizer. Right. We can tell you that the actives in the triple lipid aspect are very different. So that's why Gloria and I, knowing this, it's obviously the average consumer, the average user is not going to know. But for us, we know that there is a stark difference here. Whereas, like, you know, ascorbic acid is ascorbic acid because it comes with a ton of issues. And yeah, it's very different. It doesn't always translate.
100%. And I think that's actually kind of jumping back to us mentioning our Balm Voyage 2.0. Some of the work that went into that isn't as front-facing in terms of our communications, actually finding and comparing different sources of ceramide, the ceramide 3 that we use, and kind of backing up, like, is this the source we want to go with? We still want to make sure there's 1% active ceramide 3. There's a lot that goes into sourcing ceramides, sorting cholesterols, and all of that, all of that isn't reflected on the ingredient list. And I will say, I brought up Skin Fix not as a knock to this particular product. It's just that they're called triple lipid, and it's a very blatant, like, oh, we are a cheaper version of it. But the thing is, I think creams like the Skin Fix has a place in someone's shelf, right? But if you're someone with more mature skin looking for real results and tested benefits, it's triple lipid. The SkinCeuticals one, no brainer. It's just the difference of what you're looking for. I just, like, for me, what irks me is not necessarily that an iconic formula gets duped. It's more like that muddling communication of misrepresenting two very different things as the same things, like Victoria mentioned. They're just not.
Yeah, agreed. So to sum up kind of this arena of kind of the post-50s and beyond, if you are looking to tackle dry skin, and Gloria, please chime in with your own expertise in the realm. Like, I feel that, you know, this is where you really want to become a master of layers. And I think one of the important aspects that gets forgotten here is actually AHAs, because people feel like when skin is shedding, it causes dry skin. But what people don't realize, especially when they're older, and we mentioned kind of the data in the beginning, is that when skin becomes so inefficient at cell turnover, that adds to the dry skin. So this is really just to emphasize, like, make sure to not forget this component. You'll also see why there's body lotions out there with like 5% lactic acid that's pushed towards mature skin. Like, there's a reason for all of that. You need a good marriage of both AHAs and a really good moisturizer strategy with, you know, including the balms and the lotions. So I did want to hopefully give you guys some tips there. And one of it's slightly more expensive body lotions, but I did want to put out there as effective is the Lipicar. It's their AP plus M. It's the triple repair, because they have two kinds that look exactly the same. It's very annoying. But the more expensive body lotion, that one is very effective. So that would say if you're just trying to find a place to start and dealing with dry skin, start there. Look to HAs and start adding in some balm, some good old salves like your petrolatum to kind of to finish off your routine. So hopefully that gives you a place to start.
Yeah. And I think that concludes the meat in this episode as a whole. Like Victoria mentioned, we know we've gotten this request a few times already. So next episode, we'll dedicate an episode on estrogen-based skincare. And really, we do want to end this on a more upbeat note, because I think through our research, we have realized that it's not just marketing. It's not just the media. Even in academics, sometimes, especially in these older studies, we will find really absurdly patronizing and unhealthy lines about aging and your skin as we age.
It's almost cruel.
Yes.
Because they're so cold about it. It's so critical. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Victoria found a study that classifies different ranges of age and different levels, different types of skin aging between type 1 to type 4. We'll put the table up here. In type 4, which is more advanced skin aging, they have this line of, in type 4, they have typical age of 16 or over. There's a line that says, no normal skin, which is just not nice and also untrue.
Yeah, agreed. And there's nothing after that. This is just everybody else just gets lumped into this, you know? So that's all to say that Gloria and I feel that looking at all of this aging data, just know that this data comes from previously, which means that subjects don't have as great of skincare habits. They just didn't have the same knowledge that we did. And so we know that, our understanding of skin aging is going to evolve. It's going to get better. And I tell Gloria this all the time, Gen Zers, when they're 50, they're going to look like they're 30.
Amazing.
They're just going to look great. So, just keep that in mind when you're hearing about all of these scary stats, just how much of that the beauty, I guess the beauty standards come into play, how critical it can be. And Gloria and I we don't agree with it. And a lot of times we just find that it's not relevant,
Yeah, 100%. And I think by us doing these episodes, hopefully just insight as to how do you best take care of your skin as based by evidence and science. So you can look your best at your age, but it doesn't mean that you should strive to. Recently, I took a selfie with my newborn daughter, and let's just say that collagen is just gonna go. It's just not the same, and that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah, we're all gonna get there. We're all on the same track. No one's getting away with this, unless you have millions dedicated to derms and plastic surgery. But all that to say, we hope this was helpful for you in terms of what to do at certain age ranges. But otherwise, Gloria, where can they find us?
You can find us on our website at chemistconfessions.com. Don't forget to check out the new Balm Voyage and join the waitlist. You can write to us at info@chemistconfessions.com. You can also DM us at Instagram at chemist.confessions. You can also find us on TikTok. And we hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Next episode, we'll talk about topical estrogen skincare. And then we just have one more before we wrap up this year and go on a vacation.
We will see you guys next time. Thank you.
Bye.